Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for our session on building world-changing startups. My name's Heather Henyon. I'm the founding partner of Mindshift Capital. We're a gender lens investment fund focused on early stage tech companies. And I will disclose that we're actually an investor in Shiok Meats and Sandhya's company. So if anyone's wondering about how I know so much about the business, it's because we were involved firsthand in the due diligence, and we invested in June. And I'm also quite familiar with Dendra and Susan Graham, who's also part of our panel today. So maybe just to give a quick brief on what the theme of our panel is going to be. There's around the world a growing mass of founders who are building companies inspired not by everyday problems, but solving the world's grand challenges. These startups have been focused on pioneering frontier technologies, offering forward-thinking breakthrough solutions on urgent challenges, such as sustainable and equitable stewardship of the Earth's ecosystems, global food security, and ensuring societal needs like access to energy, housing, education, and healthcare are met. In this panel, you'll hear firsthand from the founders of world-changing startups working on securing humanity's future by finding transformative solutions to our global problems today. Going into their stories and learning more about them and their companies, you'll hear their journeys in building these kinds of breakthrough businesses that we hope will inspire more founders in the audience to also establish. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to both Susan and Sandhya. Susan is the co-founder and CEO of Dendra Systems, and Dr. Sandhya Sriram is the co-founder and CEO of Shiok Meats. And I'll let them each give a brief introduction of themselves before we go into our exciting questions of the session. Susan, would you like to start?
Thanks, Heather. It's great to be in this discussion today. Dendra Systems exists. We were founded in 2014, really driven and motivated by the challenges that we saw in the world. And there are a combination of factors that are all happening at the same time. We have a loss of biodiversity 10 times higher than it's been for the last 10 million years. And we have increasing carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And at the same time, there's 2 billion hectares of degraded land, which is a challenge for the future of food security on Earth. But it's not just a challenge, it's an opportunity. If we could restore that land back to a healthy ecosystem, then we could solve for the first two challenges around biodiversity and carbon. And so we looked at this and said, how do we enable the scale? How do we enable the efficiency to be able to restore these ecosystems? And that's why Dendra Systems started. We took a technology approach and then looked and found markets that are driving this forward and accelerating the rate of restoration so that it is higher and it rebalances the rate of destruction to the rate of restoration.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Sandhya.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm Sandhya Sriram, the CEO and co-founder of Shiok Meats. Shiok Meats is a cell-based seafood and meat company. We're based in Singapore. What we do is use stem cells and cells to grow meat and seafood instead of setting up land, huge farms, using a lot of resources, water, energy, land, and so on for setting up large factory farms. Instead of all of that, what we do is we actually grow just the meat that we eat, not the whole animal, using stem cells. So this is animal friendly, so it's ethical and cruelty free. It's health friendly because we don't use the antibiotics, for example, that's being currently used in factory farms, for example. And then it's environment friendly because we use lesser energy, water, and resources. Also, we can grow our manufacturing plants vertically. So personally, my background is actually I'm a stem cell scientist by training and education, but I kind of moved away from full-time research into business development and science. And this is actually my third startup. So my first two startups were tech startups, and started Shiok Meats in 2018. And we're looking to launch our product sometime in the next 2 years. We specifically work on cell-based crustaceans like shrimp, crab, and lobster.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very exciting topics, and very relevant, I think, to the pandemic and COVID-19 and some of the issues that we've seen emerging just globally across the world. Maybe just to start, let's go a little bit into the inspiration that both got you here, that got you both here to the kinds of innovations that you're both involved with. Susan, to start with you, I know that you were quite involved with finding a cure to cancer as a PhD student, and then now focusing on global ecosystem restoration as founder of Dendra. You've spent your career really, focused on the biggest challenges that we face today. Can you describe where you draw your inspiration from and seeking out to tackle such great challenges? And then can you talk a little bit about how you see technology and science being keys to addressing these challenges?
I love hearing where everyone draws inspiration from, because it's ultimately personal and different. I think I was born an entrepreneur. I trained as an engineer and medical scientist. And what I've discovered is that I'm driven by scale. And the definition I give myself is when I can scale impact beyond my two hands. So as a doctor or as somebody who is at the front line, you have two hands and you can help that one person at a time. And what really motivates me is being able to help people that by definition, I could never physically meet. There are never going to be enough hours in every day to physically meet the people that I'll impact. And that's what motivates me is that scale. It's exciting, but it also has this level of fulfillment that from an environmental perspective, we'll never be able to see, every single tree apart from space that gets restored. We'll never be able to walk and sit under the shade of every tree. And yet we know that we've made that difference. And from a personal level, being an engineer, I love technology. It's exciting, it's fun. It gives you that superpower to be able to scale beyond yourself. And so that's what drives me, is that you can take your creative mind and solve problems for communities and people through technology, through science, and make sure that it's robust and data-driven and able to make a difference without it having to be small scale. So it's this combination for me. It's what's the big challenge? How do we scale to an unimaginable scale of impact? And how do we use technology to be able to achieve that?
And Sandhya, what about you? What drives you? What motivates you? And what's inspired you to start such a revolutionary business like Shiok?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been a science geek, a bio geek per se. I get very excited by anything to do with the human body or animal or plants, for example, just understanding them. I still remember I used to be around 7-8 years old, and I used to question the existence of the earth and why human beings are there, for example, like what are we made up of and stuff like that. So I think curiosity was always there. I was more intrigued by the human body for sure. So I went into biotech and was working a lot on stem cells in human diseases. So I wanted to create a huge impact. Around 2014, I realized that being in healthcare, it takes a long time for that to happen. And then I said, how can I create impact in the next 5 to 7 years, probably, literally. And I was about 30-ish that time. So I thought, okay, by the time I'm 35, 37, I need to make sure that the technology that I'm working in or the research that I'm doing has to have some sort of an immediate impact at a smaller scale, but eventually, like, Susan said, I think I get very excited about scaling up right now. It's like, how do we take this technology out of the lab and actually make it a product? Because one issue that I had with academia and academic research is the publish or perish model, where You just work, you publish, and then that's it, literally. Most of the research that you didn't see the light of day. It never became a consumer product. There was news articles that said cure for cancer found, but when you read it, when you read the full article, it would say that, oh, it was done on mice, and we're still going to try it on humans. It's going to take another 10 years. I just couldn't take it. Personally, for me, I've always been an overachiever, and I don't have as much patience. So for me, things had to, I needed to see the impact and the effect of it pretty soon. So given that my forte is stem cells, I didn't want to step out of stem cells. So when I started Shiok, or before I started Shiok, I was literally like, should I do stem cells for making human organs for transplant and so on? Or should I go into cell-based meats? Because I've heard about cell-based meats for about 3-4 years prior to that. What got me excited about cell-based meats is the road to market. Even though it takes about 5 to 7 years, at least it's much lower than the 10 to 15 years that you see with biomedical or pharmaceutical products per se. So that was exciting. I love to eat. I've always been a vegetarian, actually. Due to ethical reasons, and cell-based meats just excited me. It made sense. I spoke about to a lot of people, and they were like, yeah, I mean, when we eat meat, it is made up of cells and stem cells. So you're not creating something that's out of the ordinary. And when this technology works, and honestly, if you don't have to grow an entire animal and then kill it and then eat only parts of it, why not just grow the parts of it that you eat? This takes care of food wastage. This takes care of animal cruelty, ethical reasons, and all of the issues that we see with the meat and seafood industry. So I think that keeps me going. And I wake up every morning with so much enthusiasm of what the world holds in terms of food and innovation. And honestly, the alternative protein industry is booming and exploring, as you can see, Heather. And every morning that I wake up, there's so much new stuff that's happening that gets me super excited.
Yeah, which is amazing. Just when I hear both of your stories, and just the inspiration, and also not being afraid, looking at these massive problems in our world, and a lot of people, kind of just shy away from them or put their heads in the sand. But you two both share something in common, where you both saw that as maybe inspirational, but also a challenge to overcome. But you both talked about the ideas, the concepts. Obviously, ideas and concepts are amazing, but then I think, Sandhya, you mentioned going to market, and also the path to market, as we know in the industries that you're both in, is not fast. It does require some patience. How do you take what you've gone from kind of concept and idea to actual commercialization? So to the good, your go-to-market strategy, getting beyond just the concept, even product definition, but actual commercialization, getting approvals, all of the things that you've both got to do in your respective industries. How do you think about that, and how do you address that, especially as things change and the world changes, and we have things like global pandemics to react to? So I'd love to hear from both of you about your how you've done that. Maybe Susan, if you want to start.
Yeah, when you look at how do you take an idea and make it really a massive success in reality, the first thing it comes to is the team. And at Dendra Systems, we've assembled a team of, I like to think, superheroes from completely different backgrounds. We've got ecologists working with data scientists, working with hardware engineers that are fundamentally changing what can be done from an operations point of view. And so having each of these different elements, completely different skill sets, different backgrounds, all working together for the same mission is what makes it into reality. Because if we tried to start Dendra Systems with just one single skill set, it would be impossible. The complexity of the challenge needs to be matched by the complexity of the resources to execute against that challenge. And And so that definitely is what's required. Then obviously you can't just make it a physical product that exists and ticks that box. It's got to work for the market. And this is where we first found a match. We've operated in 11 different countries around the world, but when you think about the markets and who pays for ecosystem restoration today, not tomorrow, but today, we found the regulated resources market is one where it's not in the news. It just is part of doing business, where there's a lot of land restoration going on. And so that's where we found our initial match that made a lot of sense for a market, where we were able to enable a market to be able, both in terms of an operational intelligence point of view, make better decisions, be more effective and more efficient in what they do, but also from a finance perspective, and making sure that budget decisions were made in the right way. And where this is leading is that we've effectively developed the tools that are enabling new markets to fully thrive. And so there are markets out there that exist, but they're held back. They're held back because they don't have data to make investment decisions confidently. They don't have the scale to match the need. They don't. The solution and the need is still at odds, and that's where what we've built is able to enable markets. I think one thing that we often think about is we think of ourselves. You know, what have we done to match the market? But one way that Dendra Systems has been described is an innovation catalyst. And so this is basically saying, okay, we've got an innovation, right? But we are catalyzing innovation around us. We're enabling and empowering other communities, other stakeholders, whether it's tech-based or non-tech-based, whether it's environmentally focused or non-environmentally focused. We're able to make a change in a way that then causes these knock-on changes and creates further innovation around us, which ultimately lifts everyone up. So I think it's about thinking holistically, just not just at one individual company or community or partner, but looking at the whole ecosystem. And I know I use ecosystem for the environment, but also ecosystem in terms of the market to make it ultimately succeed together.
Yeah, no, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I think really dispels some of the entrepreneurial myths, that are out there. So, and just things like IP and patents and so many of the necessities of securing the right market and then the ability to expand and grow. How about Sandhya? How about you with Shiok and the food ecosystem that you're in? It's a little bit different, but not probably super different.
Yeah, I think I resonated with a lot of what Susan said, especially the team part. I completely agree. I mean, we, as a cell-based meat company, we do biotech, but we are in a food industry and we're trying to get consumers to think differently and eat differently. So it's a lot of engineering, science, research, and then of course business marketing, and then eventually, I mean, you can have a great product, but if consumers don't like it and don't buy it, especially when it's food, it has to taste right. It has to be priced right for people to, buy it over and over again and adapt from the conventional products that they're eating. So it is a total mix of different people with different experiences, but all of us share one passion, which is to make the food industry better. So that's kind of where we all come from. So when we started Shiok in 2018 in Singapore, we were the first ever cell-based meat company in entire Southeast Asia. So we have only heard of cell-based meats in Europe, US, and Israel to an extent. So when we started off, literally nobody knew what cell-based meat was, or they've heard of it, but they've never bothered to look at what it is, why is it there, what's the technology behind it. So even till date, we spend a lot of time in education, creating awareness, speaking to people about what it is, and keeping it as transparent as possible. We want people to know where their food comes from, how it's made, when it's made, what's added into it, what are the ingredients, because those are the things that have lost transparency in the food industry over the last couple of decades. And we as consumers have the right to know what we're putting into our bodies, literally. And, I say this with a lot of humor in it, but honestly, when you go shopping in a supermarket, turn the packaging the other way, look at the ingredients. If there are more than 3 to 4 ingredients that you've never heard of and their chemical names, don't buy the product. You will realize that the shopping cart that used to be full is about quarter only full. You realize that all of your processed foods have so much unknown products in them. We have no clue what we're eating nowadays, honestly. It might say healthy, it might say a lot of protein, but if you turn over the package, it might be completely a different story. So I think that's where we started off from, other than, trying to disrupt the seafood industry and get people to eat better and clean. It was also about producing delicious, nutritious food for the entire future generations to come. And, I'm going to quote my co-founder. She puts this very nicely. But we as a biotech company, again, the biggest challenge for us was from everything from speaking to consumers to investors to the industry stakeholders is, oh, it's going to take too much time for you to ever launch the product because it's a biotech product. And we've seen that in pharma, it takes 10, 20 years for anything to come out. The answer that we have for that, and again, I'm going to quote my co-founder, is she says, in academia or in research, we want to find out every nitty-gritty detail of how it happens. Like, why is that cell doing that? Or what's the exact enzyme? Or what's the exact cellular pathway that goes on? But honestly, when you're a business and you're literally racing against time and money and you want to get to commercialization, you don't need to answer every certain question. As long as you understand the basics of it and you know that it works and you know that it's safe, you can actually get the product to market. And the safety aspect comes from the regulatory bodies as well. It's just not us trying to throw a product onto consumers saying that it's safe. The regulatory bodies that are unbiased are, regulating it, approving it, because they are seeing it from a different angle. They're not seeing it from a profit angle. They're seeing it from safety and security angle. So that's one thing that we have had to do with a lot of our team members, because most of them are from academia and research, because that's where you find these pool of researchers and engineers. We have to make them unlearn a lot of things and relearn a lot of things in terms of go away from the aspect of trying to find every nitty-gritty detail. Why don't you look at the bigger picture and see what works and what doesn't work? And if something doesn't work, quickly move on, leave that and try something else, instead of trying to figure out how I can solve this small issue where I'm thinking the cell should grow in 24 hours, but it takes 30 hours. So what? Like, how much of a difference is that, So I think it's been that. And I think it's just all of us coming together with our different experiences, but sharing the same passion, that has got us to a stage as to where we are in just 2.5 years. I mean, we've raised a lot of money. I mean, this company needs a lot of capital. So whatever we have raised is probably just a minuscule of what we are going to raise in the future. But I think just having that financial freedom per se, I call it financial freedom, because as a CEO, if I'm worried about team and money, I don't think the startup is doing very well, So that should be the least of your worries. The most challenging thing of what you're thinking every day and out is commercialization, technology, and how to scale. These are the 3 main things that you should be thinking about, and not about your team and money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree with all of that. And I think it's interesting when you think about team and then also culture. And I think, Sandhya, a lot of what you were describing was culture, and just, the training piece of just how to problem solve might be, done a certain way for scientists and engineers, but when it comes to business, it's often quite different. So blending both of those and trying to combine them, plus obviously the mission, the impact, all of the other pieces that you're both bringing together in your respective companies is phenomenal. So Sandhya, you mentioned funding and the need for capital, because I think sometimes when we talk about change making and impact, sometimes we don't talk as much about the actual money part, which for me, obviously as a VC is very relevant. So I'd love to just spend a little bit of time talking about both of your journeys in raising funding. Both of you have recently closed Series A rounds. Congratulations. And you're both, I think you raised similar amounts. I know Susan Dendra raised 10 million. I think Sandhya was 12.5 million. So if you can just comment a little bit about what your fundraising experience has been like. We know also that access to capital for female founders is often much more challenging for many reasons that we won't go into on this panel, but I'm sure we can all compare notes later. But it would be great just to hear more about your story. You know, how long did it take? What were the challenging parts of it? But then also, what would you recommend to other founders who might be raising capital as well? And what were kind of your takeaways from it? Susan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think fundraising is always a great opportunity, because when we talk about fundraising, we're talking about, you know, literally the finances required for the business to succeed into the future, into the next milestones. I like to think about it as, sure, it's the capital, but it's also the people. And the fundraising landscape over the last 6 years has dramatically changed. Just the level of education in the investor community has really shifted, and it's shifted to be supportive.
Mindshift, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big mind shift, and it's shifted to be supportive of impact-driven companies. Because previously there was this almost black and white thinking of, you're either a charity or you're a for-profit company that doesn't have impact, doesn't have positive impact. And it's like, well, hang on, the way the world should be is every company should be solving a meaningful challenge. We should all be for-profit, for good. That's the way the world should be. And I think finance has moved in that direction. And what's interesting at the moment is watching the growth stage into private equity becoming more educated into especially environmental based financing, but in general impact financing. And so what I find interesting in when I'm fundraising is to be speaking with investors and understand where they're coming from. What are they looking for? Because everyone wants financial return, but what else are they looking for? And what else do they need to know? So it's almost like an assessment of how much do you need to be educated before you will understand the opportunity. And it's like, okay, great. We almost need a mini university to train investors around, okay, what is the market, understanding the market. Some people need to understand the technology. Some people don't understand what the true challenges are. And it's about saying, well, if you understand all of those, you're fantastic. You're an investor who comes and says, I understand this, this, and this, and you look like a company that's fundamentally enabling the solution for that. But where there's something missing, it's about going on that journey. And so I think when you approach it with that mindset, it's not about whether an investor wants to invest or not. It's about finding the right fit. Because ultimately, if you're lucky enough, you create your own luck. But if you're lucky enough, you then get to choose from different investors and to say, well, what do I care about? What does the company need? Because I like to see that our investors are part of our team. They join us and they're there to help the company succeed. And indeed they do. And so it's about, from day one, when you're meeting them, you're setting up a relationship where you're empowering them to power you. And that's through finance, but also through the support that is ongoing. Because you never know what connection they can make or problem solve, if they can do a deep dive with you on something or help the team out or, say, have you seen this? They might alert you to something. And having that access, it's an expansion of your own team. It's great.
Yeah, I think I definitely echo what Susan is saying. We have been blessed with, I think, getting in us choosing investors and not investors choosing us. I think that's very, very important. like I personally do a lot of due diligence on investors before I take their money or even pitch or speak to them or whatever it is. And every investor that we have on board fills a void in our team to an extent, some way or the other. Either we're looking at a new market in the future, so we've got an investor from that region, for example. Like in your case, Heather, I think we are very excited about the MENA region and UAE and so on. So that's something that we're looking forward to in the future. But I think that's important. But as a deep tech company that won't see a product in the day of light, at least for the first 5 years, we knew that we had to raise a ton of money. And all of these engineers and scientists that we hire are expensive in the sense they are meant to be expensive. They've spent 10 years, 12 years of their life studying and becoming specialists in something that's so hard to be specialists for. And, they should get what they deserve and even more than what they deserve, sometimes I feel. So we wanted to make sure that we pay everybody very well. They're happy where they are. They want to stay with us for many, many years, because given the current work landscape that we're seeing, specifically in Asia, people change jobs every 2 to 3 years. It is a huge issue for the company. It's a huge issue for the employee as well, because they're either not happy or they don't see a growth within the company or they're not paid well enough. So all of these do matter to employees. At the end of the day, how much ever passion you have, money does matter, which is an unfortunate thing of where we live in and how we live, but it does matter at the end of the day. So for us, we knew we had to raise a lot of money. And like I mentioned, for me as a CEO, I wanted to be least worried about money. That should be the least of my worries. I should have enough runway for the next 2 years. We've been blessed to have that from day one of the company. I still remember when Kai, my co-founder, and I started this company in August 2018, we literally started with 10,000 US dollars from one of an angel investor. And we said, let's see how we can stretch this money as much as we can. Given a biotech company, we can literally spend 10,000 within 1 minute. That's how expensive things are for us. We weren't paying ourselves. We said, let's give it 12 months. So I literally told my husband, you're going to fund me for the next 12 months. I'm going to borrow money from you. My co-founder was like, yeah, I can, I have enough savings. I can manage for 12 months. I'll probably eat from not such a fancy restaurant anymore, that kind of a thing. Give ourselves 12 months. If we can't get the technology to a scale, if we can't raise at least $1 million within the next 12 months, we should probably quit this and go back to our jobs. That was our, kind of start when we started, because we wanted to be as practical as possible. Like, I have a family, I have a kid. I can't just go on a spree where I'm saying my technology is great, but nobody wants to fund it at the end of the day. But we were so lucky that we actually raised 4 million within the first 6 months. So we aimed for 1 million. That kind of became 2 million soon, but ended up raising a bit more than 4 million. That was super comfortable. I knew Series A will take time. Due diligence will be much longer. I'm honestly, I think this is the first time I'm saying this on a public landscape. I was surprised when we closed the Series A within 2020, especially given COVID, So I was thinking it's going to take a longer time. So I actually started early this year to raise a Series A, thinking that it'll take a lot more time. People want to see a bit more milestones. They'd want to fly over. They'd want to see our space, eat our prototypes and so on. Well, COVID didn't make any of that happen. Everything was virtual, but I think we've got the most supportive and most interesting investors. Like, I love speaking to our investors. Let it be 15 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. But there's so much sharing that happens within those conversations that it makes me super energized over and over again. So I think it really matters how you raise money, how you think about timeline, and how you think about your investors that you're raising from.
Yeah, thank you. Those are really relevant, I think, both to founders, but also to investors. So I would agree with everything that both of you are saying from my seat as an investor, but also as a reformed founder, I guess, as well. So I do think that it really matters who you take money from, and the investors are there for you. This is a long-term business, so most of us expect to be together for a very long time, and so choose your investors wisely. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to ask one last question, and really it's to both of you as women in STEM, where we know that there aren't as many women in these kinds of sectors. If you could just share a little bit of your experience and maybe some inspiration for the other women in the audience and who are considering being entrepreneurs, it would be great just a quick, couple minutes based on your experience and the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that being a woman is absolutely an opportunity, but I recognize that not everybody necessarily sees themselves that way. And so what I really encourage is look to the future to define your own future. Don't look to the past to define your own future, because that is holding you back potentially. But if you look to the future and if you can imagine a future without breaking the laws of physics, that should be your only rule. Don't break the laws of physics, because that will be very, very challenging. But if you don't break the laws of physics, then you can create whatever future you imagine, and therefore you can create your own future. And the second thing that I often reflect on is a risk assessment. Now, being an engineer, risk assessments are really a dry process. But when you look at yourself and your own personal risk assessment, now not everybody has the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. It requires a certain set of factors to allow you to be that. But if you think that you can, then you should do a risk assessment for yourself. What happens if I fail? And don't just do that superficial assessment. No, you've got to go deep into that. What happens if I really try and throw myself at this and quote unquote fail? And what you then realize is, well, I have an enormous amount of experience. I've got a huge, network of people. I've then learned how not to do it. And if you can answer that while keeping a roof over your head, and keeping food in the belly, and keeping safe, then what's the risk? And I think that needs to be fundamentally answered, because some people say, oh, it's too risky, without actually doing a risk assessment. They just look at it at that high level and say, oh, I can't do that. It's too risky, but without doing a risk assessment. So I'd say do that, do the assessment. And if you can satisfy those things, then it's not a risk, it's an opportunity. And it's an exciting one. I would encourage it for everyone. It's obviously, being an entrepreneur, being an engineer is not for everyone. But it's something that I think is such an exciting and rewarding path, that if you can do the risk assessment and see yourself in a future without breaking laws of physics, and one that's a really positive one, then jump in. Dive in, it's fun, and it leads to really good places.
Yeah, I think we as entrepreneurs thrive on risk and challenges to an extent. That's what keeps us excited, right? I mean, if everything goes on smoothly, you're not an entrepreneur anymore, honestly.
Boring.
It has something that keeps you on your toes. And
yeah, exactly.
All the time your mind keeps working. I echo a lot of what Susan said. I think for me, mainly, given that this is my third startup, my first startup, I wouldn't call it a failure, but I learned so much during those 2 years that I ran it, that I knew what not to do in my second and my third startup, literally, so I learned so much. I came across cell-based meats in my first startup and then started obsessing over it. A couple of my first investors that invested in Shiok meats were ones that I met in my first startup that didn't invest in my first startup. But, over the years, they saw me grow as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a person who can lead a team and a company. And when I said Shiok meats and the idea, they were like, yeah, let us know where should we send the check? Literally, it was that kind of a belief, because when you're a deep tech company, you don't have any product or technology in the first couple of years. So investors invest in you as a person, not on, of course they invest in an idea and the problem, but it's definitely you, or you as a CEO or a co-founder, or, CTO, and so on. I think my suggestion, I always say this, is yes, do look at the pros and cons, and do look at what you are really good at and what you like doing. You can be really good at something, but you don't like doing it, then please don't take it up as your life's career pathway, because you're going to crib every morning about it, and you don't want that to happen. See what drives you, what keeps you up at night, or what wakes you up every morning. And if you think that's what you want to do for the rest of your life, just go for it. But along with the risk assessment, like Susan said, I would add a certain timeline to a certain milestone. Like, for example, like I said, for us, we said 12 months, see if we can raise about $1 million, see if we can get some sort of a prototype or some sort of a technology up and running that proves to us that we can do it, not proves to the world, but even proves to us that we can do it and it's possible. Because you are dealing with biology. I mean, even Susan's dealing with biology with trees and plants and ecology, and I'm dealing with biology with cells and animals. So there's only so much that you can manipulate and do, because it is still biology. So I think given all of that, I would just encourage people to go for it. At least personally for me, I've never had this bias that I'm a female or a woman. I have not personally faced it, but I've seen many, many, many people face it, like people around me, people who work with me, all of that. Yes, unfortunately, we as women have to do double or even triple the work, to get to that level whereas our counterpart can reach it with one step. We have to put in a lot more effort and hard work. But honestly, with entrepreneurship, nothing comes easy. So just be with an open mind, be a hustler. Anything and everything you should be able to do. That's it. And if you can't do it, find someone who can do it with you. Find a person who can fill that void, who can be your co-founder, who can be your team member, and just push forward and surge ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think those are great comments to add on or to end on. So I'm going to close out there. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Sandhya. It's a pleasure and such an honor to be part of this session with you today. And we really, really appreciate how you've made the session both inspirational, but also very interesting. So thank you for taking the time and being here with us today. And thank you also to the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center for organizing this excellent session and this excellently themed conference and panel. And we thank our viewers for being with us and look forward to more discussions going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandhya.
Thanks. Yeah. Nice meeting you.